Okay. So welcome everyone. Welcome to Devon Moth Group's annual meeting and indeed our winter, what should be our winter indoor meeting. I suppose it still is because it's still winter and we are all indoors. Sadly, we're not all indoors in the same place in a nice, cozy / stuffy hall in Kenford, but hopefully that it won't be too long before we're back. Things like that. Certainly don't think it'll be too long before we are back gathered around moth traps together and field meetings. We're certainly hoping to run meetings for the group over the course of this year, assuming that everything connected with the dreaded virus continues moving in the right direction. So I'm going to share screen now. Okay, so hopefully everyone can now see that nice slide rather than having to look at me. Can someone give me a thumbs up? Preferably Phil Dean, because I can see him. Yeah, great. Thanks, George, as well. That's great. This is the so welcome to the AGM, our second virtual AGM, and this is the broad agenda for the day. We'll start with a report from myself, which will be a PowerPoint presentation, so there'll be some nice as well as listening to me drone on. Then have what's promised a very brief. I'm very happy if it wasn't brief, but Barry said it's going to be a very brief words from Barry Hemwood, the County Moth Recorder. Roy McCormack is not here tonight. He's on holiday, but he has sent me his and Treasurer's reports. So I will briefly go through those at various points of the agenda. Someone else in the waiting room. You should have received, well, certainly if you're a member of Devon Moth Group, you should have received a copy of our accounts with the email that invited you to this meeting. So we will give you the opportunity to ask questions, although see Roy prepares the accounts and he's not here, so we will do our best to answer any questions and then have a vote on adopting the accounts. We have the annual election of the officers of Devon Moth Group Council that kind of keeps the organisation running. And then we'll move on finally. Hopefully all of that will only take sort of half an hour. And then we'll move on to the two talks that we have. We have in break with normal tradition, but we've got two shorter talks this evening on the same theme from Rewilding, very trendy and exciting theme in nature conservation and tackling the climate crisis as well at the moment. So we thought it'd be really interesting to hear from a couple of projects taking place in the county on that topic. So that's the bit that's worth waiting for as we plough through the agenda. So I hope that's all okay. Audio very poor, someone's saying. No. Right, I'm trying another way of doing it. Is that any better? Yes, I'm getting thumbs up. Sorry everyone, more thumbs up. Okay, well, that's my third and final option for improving the audio, other than driving around the county shouting through your letterboxes. So let's hope that's good enough for the rest of the show, as it were. Okay, so much better. Good. Right. Sorry, I'm simultaneously trying to talk, admit people to the meeting, and monitor the chat, which is proving quite
a challenge. Right, and now, why is my, oh, there we go. Okay, so we are reviewing the year 2021 at this AGM, and it was another very strange and difficult, and I'm sure for some of you very challenging and sad year, in which we lurched once again from staying at home in lockdowns to staying alert, whatever that meant, and meanwhile being vaccinated and boosted and all these other things. And of course, most importantly, all the time, making sure that we weren't ambushed by any birthday cakes. The year from a weather perspective, which obviously has quite a big relevance for the year from a moth perspective, was quite an odd one. Not that unusual for January to be cold, but I draw your attention to April and May here on this Met Office graph. So you cast your minds back to April and May, the end of spring, or the most of spring last year, just when we're all getting our moth traps out and getting excited about the start of the mothing season. April was really cold, had a record number of frosts in April. At the UK level, these stats are, well, broken down by countries as well. And then May was even worse in a way. It was cool, much cooler than average, as you can see on that graph. But the really, so in fact, it was the coolest May since 1996. But the really noticeable thing for me, certainly trying to do moth recording, was that it was so wet. It was the wettest May for over 50 years in England, in Britain as a whole, which obviously had a major knock-on effect on moth numbers and moth abundance in general, moth numbers in traps, but also on moth populations, I suspect, as well. But of course, people did get out. The weather improved during the summer, and we had really quite a nice autumn and quite very mild spells in November and particularly in December, right up to the end of the year. Although the really exciting migrants that some of us were hoping for from Africa right at the end of December and beginning of January didn't really seem to materialize. But nevertheless, there was lots of good opportunities for mothing, and of course people got out there into the wonderful habitats that we have across the county, the beautiful woodlands and heathlands and moorlands and the spectacular coastline to record moths by day, by night, by looking for larvae and other signs. Now, these are all beautiful places, and of course, it's wonderful to spend time in any of these places, looking at and enjoying Devon's marvellous moths. But I put it to you that this was the most exciting mothing location in Devon during 2021. So for those of you who don't recognise that beautiful piece of concrete and assorted storage and things waiting to be unpacked, this is the loading yard, I guess you'd call it, of the Otter Garden Centre in Brixton, just outside Plymouth, where Chris Vincent, I think Chris is here tonight, runs a moth trap whenever he can. One of the places he runs a moth trap, and this was the one that turned up trumps this year, and in spectacular fashion, when Chris caught a maize wainscot, this maize wainscot, in fact, the one shown in this image, which was not only a new macro moth for Devon, which is, you know, pretty impressive thing to have on anyone's CV, but was new to mainland Britain, because the only previous record of maize wainscot anywhere in the British Isles was on Scilly, on St Agnes, in 2011. So that was an absolutely stunning find in that beautiful piece of habitat that I just showed the photo of. So very well done to Chris for that. But he was closely and quickly followed by a visiting mother, Sarah Patton from Sussex, who actually wasn't in Devon to do mothing at all, but had bought a trap with her and ran a trap at Branscombe, where she was staying. And on the following night, this was, so Chris's was on the 7th of September. Sarah caught this one shown here on the 8th of September at Branscombe. And then Dave Wall also had one on the 8th of September. I assume that was Exmouth. So we had 3 maize wainscots in the county within 2 days. Presumably there were others lurking around that didn't grace any of our moth traps, but anyway, pretty spectacular. So that's amazing for this little bit of concrete. But of course, the story doesn't end there, because prior to the maize wainscot find, Chris had another first for Devon at the same location in the form of this rosy underwing. That was slightly early, right at the beginning of September, the night of the 3rd of September, which absolutely amazing. And in another quirk, coincidental quirk, the second ever rosy underwing, this one, was caught by Karen May about a week later on the 9th of September. And Karen is Chris's sister. So, and that's it. That was in her garden at Wooter, is it? Wooter? I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Wooter, on the southern edge of Dartmoor. Apologies for my pronunciation. Anyway, so that loading bay is clearly the place to be during 2021 for all the for many of the exciting moths. But if you couldn't be there, then in hindsight, I would have thoroughly recommended this stunning bit of habitat in Exeter. And this is a place where Jack Orton, who again I think is with us tonight, has recorded this amazing little bagworm, Triquintrella. It's a good job no one's recording this. Anyway, new for the county, new for Devon. It's and Jack found these in a colony of them, a number of them in urban Exeter from September onwards, and has had them confirmed by Phil Sterling, who's a major authority in these rather tricky bagworm species. It's a rare species. It's only known from a few scattered locations in Britain, and we think the nearest known location to this colony in Exeter is Portsmouth. So it's a pretty stunning find. Jack also gets another mention in dispatches because at the rather more traditional mothing location of Dawlish Warren, he found the mines of this Cosmopteryx species new to Devon. This is I guess a recent colonizer. It was first recorded in Britain in 1996 in Dorset, and it's been recorded in Hampshire, possibly other places since then. But so 2 new firsts for Devon for Jack this year. Another good place to be in 2021 was Meath Quarry, Devon Wildlife Trust Reserve up in North Devon, where Steve Hatch caught dark crimson underwing in early September, the first record of this impressive, beautiful moth for North Devon for Vice County 4. All 5 of the previous Devon records have been in VC3, South Devon. And also at Meath Quarry, David Turrell found a red-tip clearwing to a lure, used a pheromone lure in July, which also appears to be, well, it was the first, it's not the first for the Vice County, but it's the first for Vice County 4 since 1960. and only the third ever in North Devon. And the use of pheromone lures is something that's obviously becoming more popular, more common, and generated quite a few exciting records during 2021. And I'm just going to highlight one of those, that in an otherwise pretty dismal spring, as I was kind of talking about the weather conditions in spring last year, one of the really exciting species that was recorded on multiple occasions, mostly to pheromone lures, is this Pamini gigantica, gigantiana. I should have practiced these, shouldn't I? Anyway, you can see it. That's why it's written on the screen. And that was recorded in a whole range of different places. The first record's actually from Exeter, not to a pheromone lure, but after that, quite a few people went out and recorded it at pheromone lures after that. Right, I think that's the end of it for me, the end of me garbling scientific names for a little while, you'll be glad to know. So I will pass over to you, Barry, if you want to unmute yourself. I'll leave this screen up if that's okay, because it's got the agenda on there.
Right, well, thanks very much for that, Rick. Yeah, well, what can I say? I'm still processing the year's moth records that you've all diligently sent me, and it's over 143,000 were received. So it's a colossal number of records, and I really couldn't cope with it without significant help from other people. So firstly, I must thank Phil Barden, who actually does the verification of a big chunk of the records. Kim Lever picks the records off iRecord and verifies those for me. And Phil Dean is an enormous help, creating all sorts of wonderful spreadsheet wizardry, which makes the process much more accurate and saves a colossal amount of time, really. And lastly, Kevin Johns, who has taken over from Darryl Rush, kindly digitalizing handwritten records from one or two people who don't have a computer. So I'm not going to say much more. I mean, it's a colossal task. You're all terribly patient and cooperative with me when I raise queries. The thing is that when the records arrive, they have a brief visual scan through by me. And I do that very quickly. I have to do it very quickly because of the numbers involved. And that's why I raise some queries then. Then when everybody's records are in, and we're on one spreadsheet with 143,000 plus rows, they all go through various other automated checks, and they throw up further queries, which I just passed me by. I mean, I can't spot everything with a quick visual trawl through. So that's why you get further queries later on. And the process is nearly finished now, you'll be pleased to know. There shouldn't be many, if any, more queries. But thank you for your patience. And I'm going to have to think about ways to save myself a bit more time next year, really. But anyway, for now, it's pretty much done. And thank you all very much for your records and your cooperation in responding to my queries.
That's great. Thanks very much, Barry. And yeah, that absolutely phenomenal quantity of records that people are generating. Some amazing records. Obviously, I've highlighted a few of the particularly notable ones, new for the county, macro moths and micro moths. I'm sure there'll be more to come to light, and plenty of other exciting records will come to light as we work our way through that 140,000+ records. We will, as usual, be aiming to produce the annual report by sort of end of March kind of time, as we endeavour to do every year, and obviously that will have a more thorough assessment of exciting and interesting records that came in during 2021 in it. It's never too late, of course, to send in your records, do that pitch for Barry. I mean, it is too late in a sense. If you send in your records now, they won't go into the annual report, but they will be processed in due course. They will be verified by Barry and the team, and they will end up in the Devon Moth Group database, and from there be shared with the Wildlife Trust and Devon Biological Record Centre and the National Moth Recording Scheme run by Butterfly Conservation. So in that sense, it's never too late to send in your records, and many thanks to all of you who do. Right, still got people joining or people falling out and rejoining possibly, but okay, great. Yeah, unless, are there any questions? Anyone got any burning questions? I see there is a note of thanks to Barry in the chat. That's really good. If you have any questions, then obviously feel free to put them in the chat. We will carry on in the sake of brevity. So I'm not going to read the whole of Roy's secretary report. It will be published in the next newsletter along with all the action from the AGM. Just to highlight a few sort of key points from it. The group's still growing. Roy notes that we had 152 members at the beginning of 2022. Obviously mostly in Devon, but as usual there are some that live in other parts of the country. All of the meetings, the indoor and council meetings during the last year were held online, and that's been quite challenging for some people. But it's at least enabled us to keep meeting and keep things ticking over. And as I said earlier, we'll hopefully be moving to back to holding meetings, field meetings, council meetings, and indoor meetings in face-to-face in the future. I think those are the kind of key points, really. Roy, thanking everyone, particularly people on council. I'd reiterate that thanks to everyone on council and the other people who've assisted that Barry's already named and thanked there for all their help in keeping the group running over the course of the year, especially in the course of such a challenging period. Okay, so I'll move on to the Treasurer's report, which is very brief, and the accounts, which hopefully you've already had a chance to look at. Roy's report reads, as you will see from the accounts, we started the year with net assets of £2,985 and ended with £2,223, a surplus of £238 in the year compared to a surplus last year of £100. Subscriptions are slightly down to 1,286 from 1,292. Well, that's like less than one person. Well, it's one person probably. And we also had donations of £70. Expenditure on members' newsletters and information, that's including the annual report. In fact, a main part of that is the annual report, increased by £215. But last year's figure was rather low as we had a lot of stamps in hand. Roy tends to buy stamps, postage stamps in big blocks, which obviously saves us money in the long run as the stamps inevitably go up in cost. So we had a lot of stamps in hand from the preceding year. The stock of stamps is now shown separately on the balance sheet. The website, the group website cost us £113 this year instead of £202 in the previous year. So that's Roy's report as the treasurer. I should also thank, well, huge thanks to Veronica McCormack, Roy's wife, for doing the bookkeeping for the group for the year, which obviously enabled these accounts to be produced. So she and Roy took on all of that work, which is fantastic, and I thank them in their absence tonight. Also like to thank Nick Pratt, who's probably here. I can't see the list of attendees at the moment, but Nick acts as a sort of independent person scrutinising the accounts, independent in the sense that he's not on council. So he can check that council are using the group's finances appropriately and not siphoning it all off into our offshore bank accounts. And Nick gave it gave the accounts a full thumbs up. Does anyone have any questions on the accounts or the Treasurer's report? The Treasurer's report will also appear in the next newsletter.
Sorry, Richard, just a quick observation really. Would
Yes,
it be
Kim.
cheaper? Would it be cheaper for the group to buy a franking machine?
Well, that's an interesting question. Yeah, good question, Kim. I don't know. I've no idea how much franking machines cost, but obviously, yeah, the cost of actually sending something out through them is cheaper. Well, we can certainly look into it. Yeah, it's a good idea. I will make a note so that we can note that in the minutes, as it were. Not that we do sort of proper minutes, but obviously the vast majority of members get their newsletters by email, which obviously is a huge saving in terms of cost, and obviously the environmental saving of not using all that paper as well. And at that point, I would also really like to thank Devon Biodiversity Record Centre, who continue to produce the small number of hard copy newsletters that we send out to members that want to receive or can't receive the newsletter by email. Okay, any other questions or comments or suggestions like Kim's on the report? No?
No.
No. Okay. Right, great. So I'm going to I'm just going to make the grid of people much bigger so I can see it. So I'm going to ask for votes now, just to check that everyone's happy to approve the accounts as circulated by email prior to the meeting. If you're not on our email circulation list, but you are a member, then I'm afraid you won't have received the accounts ahead of the meeting, but very happy to send them out to you separately if you want to let me know about that. But can I have either a show of hands, or if you want to be fancy and use the little icon thing that enables you to put your hand up. I can't remember where that is on mute. No, I can't remember where that is. So although, oh yeah, everyone's found it. Well done. You're all ahead of me. So yes, either physically put your hand up or put the little hand up if you approve the accounts. I'll just have a quick scroll through. Lots of thumbs up.
I've got my hand up. I can't find that little hand.
Don't worry, Sue. I can see you. That's great. Yeah. Thank you. Does anyone any votes against? Put your hand up now if you're voting against. Everyone's disappeared. That's good. There's still a few hands up, but they're the same people, I think, who had their hands up before. Can't see any hands of anyone against. If you're desperately trying to say that you don't approve the accounts, please unmute yourself and shout now. Okay, right. I'll take it that the accounts are approved. Thank you very much for that. Okay, I'm gonna shut that down. Okay, right. So that brings us on to the election of officers for Devon Moth Group Council. This, you'll remember, is something that we have to do well, we have to do it every year. Oh, wrong way, sorry. Oh, sorry, I had a slide there. I've forgotten about that with the main headline results of the accounts. I think we've kind of done that now. So most of the members of council are elected annually. That's what our constitution says. The exception is the chair, which is elected on a 3-year cycle. I've inquired ahead of the meeting, and all the current members are willing to stand again for election. And I've received no other nominees ahead of the meeting. So I'm proposing that we just take a single block vote for essentially, well, literally your current council to be re-elected. Right, got a hand up. Bill. Oh, are people voting? Is that why hands are up? Okay, I'm assuming people are voting rather than they want to ask a question. Okay, so yes, please raise your hand or use the little hands up icon if you approve. Anyone against? I can't see anyone against. So again, if you're desperately trying to vote against, please unmute yourself and tell me. No. So you had a sad face on just then. Was that accidental? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. So I'll take it that everyone, all these people are duly re-elected, and I'd like to thank them again for all their hard work over the course of the last year, and welcome them back to council. And all the hard and exciting work that we've got for the year ahead. I haven't mentioned it as yet, but many of you will have already noticed either on our Facebook page or through Twitter or indeed on our website, a reminder, a notification that this year is the 25th anniversary of Devon Moth Group. The group was formed at a meeting on the 25th of January 1997. So Tuesday just gone was the 25th anniversary of the founding of Devon Moth Group. And I was looking at the, I've got a copy of the first sort of newsletter from that first meeting. It was surprising how many of the 18 members that were there that helped form Devon Moth Group are still part of the group today, which is great. So we are hoping to do some nice celebratory kind of things over the course of the year. We decided that the 25th of January was not a particularly good, in the middle of a pandemic, was not a particularly good date to have any kind of get together to celebrate Devon Moth Group's 25th anniversary, but we will be intending on doing various things through the course of the year to celebrate that significant birthday. Right, I think that's brought us to the end of the AGM. We're only a little bit over time. So I'm now going to invite the first of our guest speakers for the night to join us. As I mentioned earlier on, we thought rewilding would be a really interesting theme. I'm hoping that our speakers will say something about what they mean by rewilding. I'm certain that they're going to talk about the particular projects that they're involved with. Rewilding is a word that means different things to different people. Indeed, it's come in for some flack from time to time on social media. I think a lot of people just think it means beavers and wolves and things like that. But obviously there's a huge amount more to it than that. and a huge amount to be gained, I think, by our moths, both in Devon and more widely across the UK. So first up, talking about a project that's going on the Sharpham estate in just outside Totnes. We have Jack Scoos, is that how you, sorry Jack, I should have asked you how you pronounce your name, and Phil Wilson from Ambios Limited, who can, oh there's Phil in the background, yeah, hi, who are going to do a double act talking to us about their project. Okay.
Thanks very much. Really nice to see you all. I'm going to screen share if that's okay. I'll just start the presentation. Just we were thinking just to talk, and actually it might make more sense to share our screen if that's okay. So let me do that quickly. Now, okay, hopefully you're seeing an intro slide there.
Yeah, can see that.
So, well, my name is Jack. I'm director of Ambios Limited. Ambios is a nature conservation training organisation. We're based, well, our sort of home is on the Sharpham estate in South Devon, just on the Dart estuary. Sharpham's 550-acre estate, and we're tenant farming around 130 acres of that, where we have a residential centre where students come and stay, trainees come and stay, and learn the sort of fundamentals of a career in nature conservation. That's about, you know, species identification, habitat assessments, through to kind of public engagement, practical rangering skills, and anything in between. And a lot of the audience tonight, I guess, may have worked in the sector and know the kind of the skills that are needed, and often the skills that are lacking, I guess, in the prospective employees, the people that are applying for the job. So we're kind of here trying to fill that skills gap. And we've been doing it for a while. We've been based at Sharpham for 14 years or so, and had the farm for 10. And alongside that, and prior to that, we're running projects with my colleague Simon Roper, fundraising to try and support the NGOs and the employers in the sector who perhaps are under-resourced to develop their human resource and the training, offer the training themselves. And the kind of graduate market where they're coming out of university and really needing those practical applied skills that university perhaps wasn't able to provide them with. So that's been our history, and that's kind of who we are. I'll move us through the slides if I can. So Sharpham then, and our main home, and what I wanted to talk to you tonight a little bit about is our rewilding efforts here on the estate. So of our 130 acres, 50 of which have been set aside for rewilding for the time being. We took on a tenancy extension to our 80-acre holding 2 and a bit years ago, with the ambition to rewild it really. And of course, like you said, like you introduced the topic tonight, rewilding means lots of different things to different people. And we really wanted to kind of try and distill all the learning and all the opportunity, I guess, that rewilding offers to our small plot of land in a beautiful and inspiring location, and make it quite outward facing. You know, make it, connect it with an audience, connect it with people, be a people-based sort of project really. So for context, our 50 acres is here, the sort of the northern part of the Dart estuary. Totnes is just up here, Dartmouth is further down here. A lot of the farmland around us is classic Devon farmland, you know, intensively managed grassland and arable. And most of the kind of the habitats are really found clinging to the estuary edges and river edges. Home farm, the home farm rewilding patch is this 50 acres here, next to the Sharpham Marsh, and running along the stretch of the Dart estuary, with Sharpham House and Sharpham Vineyard just down here. So semi-improved pasture, classic Devon farmland really. It was an ex-dairy farm, non-organic dairy farm, and where scrub and woodland boundaries were quite diverse, but quite sparse, in that this is really a historic listed parkland. And one of the kind of contexts and criteria of our rewilding was trying to apply the principles of rewilding to quite a sensitive, high value, highly viewed parcel of land. Like I say, it's listed, it's set within the South Devon AONB, Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty. The listing is of a Georgian period, so classic parkland really, you know, grazed pasture with trees sort of dotted, you know, throughout the pasture land. But actually both its ecology, when we inherited it, and its historic value were in a fairly degraded state. The parkland was in poor condition in that there weren't that many of the traditional parkland trees, about 140 missing trees. The viewpoints and the important kind of focal areas of the parkland were also underused really as what they were intended for in the parkland heyday. So we set about rewilding and restoring both the ecology and the historic value of this important landscape. So this is a view from what we call the viewpoint, what would have been the sort of carriage stop off on the way to the house, with Totnes and Dartmoor in the background. So again, you know, what you're seeing is fairly standard Devon, you know, fields, static, fixed, short grassland, fairly linear in the hedges and so on, fairly ecologically boring, let's say. So what we wanted to do is try and inspire a kind of new vision and look at it in a different way and get the stakeholders, of which there were many, both, like I say, within the AONB. We had Historic England and Natural England interested, because in being tenants, for us, it's really important to make this a kind of viable enterprise, not just a kind of philanthropic effort, but actually to make a business stack up around rewilding. So stewardship for us was a really important vehicle and means to that. The subsidies that were provided for farmland to try and sort of balance the ecology and the agricultural outputs of the land. And so we went into a stewardship agreement in negotiating with our landlords and the trustees of the trust, the Sharpen Trust, Historic England and Natural England, to try and get this balanced restoration of the parkland and the ecology of this landscape. So we wanted to really share that vision. And in doing that, really wanted to kind of sell what it is we're talking about in terms of rewilding, in terms of allowing nature to sort of drive natural processes to determine the outcomes of what we're seeing, really, through creating the right conditions for that, through introducing grazing and browsing animals at small scale to kind of keep the balance of succession in check. So in this vision, we have a rebalanced grazing and vegetation growth, where we're encouraging disturbance to allow the development of diverse and dynamic vegetation with more places for wildlife to live, giving nature a chance to flourish. So if we go back to December 2019, when we took the tenancy on, you can see quite a different landscape there. And what the images that I've just showed you were kind of a vision of what it could be like. And what was important for us to really share what we're talking about when we're talking about this sort of vision for rewilding. And we often use a third as a kind of a ballpark way of looking at what the landscape might be like. So a third open pasture, a third established woody vegetation, woody trees, and a third the kind of stuff in the middle, the scrubby growth, the stuff that you don't really see in the countryside anywhere, the messy stuff, you know, the stuff where actually all the magic happens, but that's missing mostly from our landscape. So a few pictures just taken through the years after having not had any grazing animals on the holding throughout the first year and a half of the tenancy, and just letting nature kind of determine it, really, to give us a chance to see what was within the fields and to allow it to express itself before we started to make these interventions. through the late summer and the autumn, where you get to see the grass die back. You can kind of feel that connection, that milder connection with Dartmoor in the background over here. These are some of our trainees helping to remove some of those internal fences so that we could allow the stock to move freely through the holding. And then you know, the establishment over time of this structural diversity, where we really, again, we don't see much of that in our landscapes anymore, but that's really where the important habitats, you know, are to be found. And through taking off all that grazing pressure, we're starting to see the first signs of woody regeneration. The noise of grasshoppers and crickets making the place feel alive. We're noticing great green bush crickets across the area, not just in the margins and in the hedgerows, but actually in the central pasture as well. Dramatic changes. Increases in seed-eating birds, making use of the availability of the food and using new perches. Conspicuous rise in stone chat numbers, and large numbers of swallows and swifts and house martins feeding on small insects over the fields too. We're seeing 3 or 4 different barn owls feeding on the small mammals that are moving through the pasture land now that we've got this tussocky sort of littoral layer through the grasslands, and seeing these food chains developing. So our role as Ambios, as nature conservation training organisation, is to equip trainees with those fundamental skills of a career in the conservation sector. And a lot of that's around monitoring and identification of species. So we established quite an important or quite a comprehensive monitoring programme to really to equip our trainees as an educational resource, to make sure that they've got a practical application of those skills. They can go out and carry out real surveys that are really kind of that are following nationally recognised procedures, that we can then model the work that we're doing at Sharpham and sort of start to work with others perhaps to see what might work on other pastures, both in our local area and further afield, and then of course to evidence and celebrate outcomes. I was talking about stakeholders earlier on. We're also currently holding a project funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund called Sharpham Wild for People, which is really about where we're doing the rewilding under our stewardship agreements and under our tenancy with the Sharpham Trust. The lottery project is there to kind of to connect us with a much wider audience. So we have educational days and visits. We have events funded through the lottery, and importantly, we have a lot of volunteers coming to spend time helping with the rewilding. And Phil's role is as our employed ranger to run those rewilding volunteering days. So a lot of our survey work was looking at the kind of key skills that the students would use, but also proxy species that would help us to sort of monitor, to tell the story of change over time. Birds, vegetation, butterflies, bats, dormice and other mammals, reptiles. We're looking at earthworms. We have fixed point drone photographs taken quarterly over the holding. So again, we've got both a storytelling element, but also some actual fairly useful data. And that's set across a survey program, which we apply with our different users. So we've got trainees working here, like I say, on their 3-month placement. Phil has his weekly volunteers and then a monthly rewilding day. And we also partner on our farm with a charity called United Response for adults with learning difficulties. And that charitable work offers day service to local people with learning difficulties, which is staffed, and they come and look after the livestock that we're using to help with the rewilding. We have pigs currently, and we have our grazing belted Galloways, small numbers. So the United Response team are helping kind of with the movements and with the checking of the livestock, but also with some of these basic citizen science surveys, going out looking at butterflies and so on, and that data is coming back and helping us paint these pictures. So kind of trying to make it a very accessible, quite simple and repeatable survey work at certain levels. So we're looking to repeat these surveys annually. We're going to start looking at soil. Actually, we carried out soil surveys, baseline soil surveys last year. Interested in audio monitoring, and like I say, trying to engage our United Response audience in different, very sort of creative ways. And the Sharp and Wild for People project really allows us to kind of the options of being a bit more kind of creative and fun with some of those ways of working with different audiences. So that's the kind of background really to our work. Phil's, like I say, has been employed as our ranger, and his passion has seen him survey a lot of the moths on the holding. So I wanted to hand over to him a little bit to talk about that.
Hello, everyone. Really great to see some faces of the names that I've seen throughout this last year. So I'm Phil. I'm the conservation ranger, and last year was really the first year that the first time I really got into mothing. I tried it once before and gave up. I think it was the carpets that threw me, but I've returned and dedicated. And yeah, I started surveying last year, February 27th. I have my date down, and I was using a Robinson's trap with a 125 megawatt bulb, and it started off slow and then quickly picked up. And what I have written down is by June I had 63 species, and by December or by October I had 220 species that we recorded on the farms. So I've been monitoring the fields that were not part of the rewilding, but we're about 200 meters away as the moth flies, I suppose. So I guess a lot of those, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that a lot of those that we have trapped will have come from around. So I'm pretty happy to claim that we've got 220 moths on this site, so that's great. Yeah, so over 39 traps, we recorded over 2,000 moths and about 220 species. And it's just, for me, coming in as a complete newbie, it was just really spectacular to see the variety that you see across all the families. And I've also got written down here that we've recorded 12 out of 16 of the families, although that may be 13. One of our other staff here thinks that he saw a lunar hornet moth, so maybe getting the 13th family in there. And maybe I can ask somebody if they could put in the chat how many families are recorded in Devon. That'd be really good for me to know. Because yeah, I mean, coming in as a complete newbie, I have no real reference as to what's a good moth and what's a bad moth. Not like there's any such thing. I think all moths are fantastic, but you know, just to get people excited, it's good to know which are the moths I should be pointing out. But yeah, I'll keep an eye on the chat. So yeah, throughout the year, we've tried to engage as many of the trainees that come here as possible. I actually worked quite closely with one trainee who, every time I did the moth trap, came along, apart from one day when I wasn't available to do it, and I asked her to do it, and it turned out to be the day that had the most moths. I think we had well over 300, and I left her all day to do it, and when I got home from my day out, she was still doing it. So yeah, it's just fabulous. Some other points that I got. I'm saving the best to last. I'm really trying to build up some suspense here. But in one trap we got 67 straw dots. Again, might be quite a normal thing for people. They can comment on that, but that seemed like a pretty spectacular night. And some things that we just noticed across the surveying period. I noticed. Again, this is all just personally noticed, that we got quite a lot of Quakers early in the season, and that quickly changed into treble lines. That had a bit of a peak, and that was overtaken by the rustic, uncertain Ags, then followed by footmen. Yeah, so just some things I've basically noticed. If anyone's got anything to comment there, please do. But yeah, as I say, we saved the best till last. I did a little bit of reading into this because at the time we had a university group visit. They stayed for 10 nights, and of the 10 nights, we moth trapped for 7 of the nights. We had 2 Robinson traps out, a sheet with an LED light, and maybe even a heath trap. I can't quite remember, but we had a good go at it. It was right in the middle of, or right at the start of September, I think it was. And in 2 of those nights, we managed to catch the Clifton Nonpareil, and that went down rather sweetly with all of the students. I don't know, again, this is another question I'd love answered, would be, you know, how likely this would be to be a retrap. It was probably 4 nights in between the first and the second trap. So I'd love to hear from you. So yeah, as I say, I'm very much a newbie to this, and I appreciate that what I have to say might not be breaking news or anything like that, but I'm really glad to have a group that I can talk to that completely understand, because sometimes I walk into the room and I'm really excited about a moth and nobody really gets it. But yeah, so thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to reading your messages. All right, I'll pass you over back to Jack.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, you can really tell Phil's passion for this, and it's been amazing having, you know, that dedicated effort, and how much everyone else around us has really kind of got the moth bug. Yeah, so big thanks to Phil of all the survey efforts. So yes, that's us really. Thanks for listening. We're Ambios Limited. Please kind of stay in touch and follow us. Phil will be part of the moth group for sure. And we're at Sharpham, and the Wild for People project is there to be enjoyed. But yeah, thanks for having us.
That's excellent. Thanks very much, Jack. Thanks, Phil. Lovely to see some moths, and fantastic to hear about your plans and your work to date on the estate. That's really exciting. I'm sure you'll have lots more moth captures to come as well. I'm not sure, do you want to, I mean, normally we ask people if they've got questions after talk, so I'm not sure whether to do that now for your talk, and then
I'm happy. I'm out of sight. Okay, here we are. Yeah, happy to answer any questions. It's probably better that way, so I don't ramble on and talk about anything.
Well, what I was wondering is whether you're happy to wait till the end, till after Ben's talk, and then do questions on both talks, or whether you'd rather get yours out of the way now, I suppose.
I think if we get it out of the way, maybe.
Yeah.
If that's okay, yeah.
That's okay.
Okay, that's fine. So does anyone have any questions or comments for Jack or Phil? I've got one to start the ball rolling. You mentioned that you're running your moth trap, Phil, not in the rewilding area, but in the adjacent, presumably still intensively farmed field. What's the reasoning for that? Is it because of livestock or?
Yeah, we'd probably describe it as a conservation farm. So it wouldn't be too intensively farmed, actually, the fields that I'm actually trapping from. The reason is that I did actually try getting the Robinson out in the field, and I had a battery and a battery converter, but something failed on me, not too sure, and I just didn't explore it any further. We did do a little bit of trapping in the fields for the BioBlitz that we had. For anyone that doesn't know what BioBlitz is it's a 24-hour nature surveying event. Oh, hi, Peter. I can see you down there. Peter Shaw, he was down there with us. He's given us a wave. Thank you very much. So we did actually do a little bit of trapping on the rewilding site, but the limitation was not having a remote moth trap. However, Santa Claus was very kind to me this year, and I have got a heath trap which I've ran for several nights already, and my moth number is up to 3, which doesn't sound very impressive, but for winter I'm going to take it as a win.
That's not bad. That's not bad. It's 2 more than I've had so far this year, so yeah.
There we are. And 3 of those were all 3 of those I had this morning, actually, and one
right.
When I just came into the office. I just had a many-plumed moth in the office, so fantastic.
Very good. Okay, so yeah, so it was lack of portability was the reason.
Yes,
yeah. Logistic issue.
But there is a plan this year to take that out. Obviously, I mean, it's a no-brainer, really. There's a few things. There's been a few times where I've been looking through the moth book and I've gone, oh, I'd love to get that moth, and then the next time I put the trap out, I get it. So I've been doing a lot more of that actually, and I hope to find a few in there. We'll see.
Excellent. Okay, great. Any other questions? There are lots of nice comments in the chat about the talk. Sarah says, is there an opportunity for a combined wine tasting and mothing event? Sounds like a nice idea.
Yeah, it's always important to keep your mind open and try and find where the opportunity is. I'm not sure about the wine tasting. I don't know if anybody's heard, but they've moved house. They've gone down the valley a bit at Sandridge Barton. So maybe not with Sharpen wine, maybe BYOB.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd not heard that. Right. So, but is the vineyard still working, as it were?
We've still got vines in the ground.
Yeah.
They're still growing grape for this next season, but they're making the wine down at Sandridge.
Okay. Right.
Less of the Sharpen name and more of the Sandridge name now.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Right. Any other questions?
Oh, Richard, not so much a question, I suppose answering a question that was posed about the Clifton Nonpareil. That's unusual. I mean, they're fantastic moths to see. They're huge. And I think last year was probably just about the best year we've had for them in Devon, but nonetheless, they're still unusual and still a delight to see every time they do come along. I only had one in my trap all of last year, so you know they're certainly not common by any means.
No, absolutely. I'm sure there are people here who are yet to meet one. I mean, it was only, I think it was 2017. Yeah, yes, a few hands going up. It'll come. I mean, I think the first, I think it was the autumn of 2017 when they first started to turn up in Devon. So it's a very recent thing. But yeah, really exciting to have them there on the estate. I actually, because that was Exeter University, the Cornwall lot, wasn't it, that you had on site, and I follow some of them on Twitter, so I was seeing all the excitement of their them all in the barn going through the moths and all that huge excitement when the Clifton Nonpareil turned up. Yeah.
I just ask a question.
Yes, go on, Paul.
I was just wondering, you as tenants, you said you had to be sort of financially viable. I was just wondering what sort of percentage of your income comes from the pigs and cattle, the grants, and your training activities?
I guess the business is primarily held by the training. That's the biggest percentage of our income. We have to make the kind of the farm side of it pay and cover the cost of the rent of the holding and contribute to the cost. But actually, our stocking levels are so low that there isn't really that much economy with the stock itself. Of the stock that's there's quite a lot of interest locally from pubs and cafes to stock some of the meat once it reaches that point. So we're kind of interested to see where that goes. We'd like to add in the rest of our holding to make it the full 130 across the full 130 acres to be rewilding. And I think then the story and the marketing around some of the produce might come. And then I think the kind of opportunities around other landowners and joining up to make places like Sandridge, that are really championing, local provenance food and so on. We can perhaps sort of tell that story through their outlets. But our main business, it's sort of supported by three pillars. We've got our training provision, our sort of charitable work with United Response, who pay us a kind of a fee for managing the day service. And then the stewardship and the farm itself that kind of make up the three income streams. And we were just looking at being kind of creative around how we can maximize rewilding. There's lots of talk around the economics of rewilding at the moment. As tenants, there's some stuff that's immediately kind of switched off for us. But certainly educational visits. We've been doing a few walks and talks that are bringing in a small income stream. So there is a kind of viable income stream there for us, for sure. And actually, what you'll hear shortly from Ben about Holnacott, we went up to see Ben and were totally inspired by the work that the Trust are doing up there. And there's some grant sources which we're finding where we'd like to kind of mimic some of the work that Ben's done down here, and finding that actually the story for bidding into grants and philanthropic giving is actually quite rich for us to tap into too. So we've managed to fund some of the infrastructure development through grant aid under rewilding terms. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
That's great. Right. Well, on having you've done the introduction for me there, Jack. So I think on that note, we'll move on to Ben, and we'll get Ben to tell us about the amazing work that he and the National Trust have been doing at the other end of the county on the Honeycutt estate. Okay, Ben, over to you.
Yeah, just say thanks to Jack and Phil. That was yeah, I enjoyed that. And yeah, I did spend a day with the guys last year, and I really enjoyed that. It was inspiring for me as well. I'd just like to start by saying, in no way, shape, or form am I a moth expert or know much about moths, so I apologise in advance. But
that's fine. That's fine. Don't worry about that. We're keen to hear about the habitats that you're creating.
Yeah. Okay. No worries. Right. Can I get? Hang on. I just need to get that out of the way. There we go. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, brilliant. Right, so there we go. Yeah, so I work for the National Trust, well, really sort of across Exmoor, but mainly on the Honeycutt estate, which is not Devon. It's West Somerset, and it's an estate. It's about 12,500 acres. And we own most of it. So it's 2 whole river catchments, and it's upland. So sort of Exmoor upland, so a bit of peat, you know, heath and moorland, and then down into steep wooded combes, and then into the vale areas, which is predominantly agricultural, and then out through the salt marsh and into the Bristol Channel. It's mainly tenanted. There's some commons land up in the uplands, but we've got 14 tenant farmers on the estate, and that's mainly sort of that's mainly grazing. There's not much arable left in the area, and it's beautiful. It's undoubtedly beautiful, very picturesque. Nice hedges, you know, sort of bleak moor, and then down into spectacular sort of wooded valleys with sort of you know, crystal clear streams, and then into the green fields of the Vale. And I heard you sort of guys talking earlier on about sort of what rewilding meant, and I was thinking about what it is that my role is. I mean, my role is a project manager. Sort of, I work on, I guess, landscape scale conservation projects, but I don't really like the term conservation, because it speaks to me of sort of preservation, and I think sometimes with sort of conservation in the UK, the two get confused, and the trust don't like really like talking about rewilding either, because that speaks to wolves and, you know, lynx and beaver, and I think that for certain people has got certain connotations. And I think Jack and Phil hit on it. For me, all I'm really looking to do in my role, we've got a countryside. This looks pretty, and to many people it is green and pleasant land, but it's missing mess, it's missing inconvenience, it's missing that scrub, and that, you know, all of that messiness, and that's my job really, is to just put back some of that process, back some of that mess, because that is, I think, in large is what we're missing in the countryside, is that messy, sort of scrubby, mixy, mosaicy habitat. We've lost a lot of the natural process, a lot of the natural function, even sort of the physical processes in our soils and in our rivers. You know, we've simplified, and we've constrained, and we've confined, and it's about sort of letting the brakes off a little bit, and letting nature do what it wants. Most of my role is to do with rivers and streams, so river catchments, so putting some of that sort of natural function back into rivers and streams. And the best way I would describe that is I'm looking to reverse historical drainage. So here, this is actually Arlington Court. I don't know if any of you guys know that, but this is above the dam there, and just by accident, this lovely wet woodland has developed. It's where they've put the dam in, and then you've got sort of sediment deposition behind, and it's done away with the single channel thread of the river that's been modified and impacted over hundreds, if not thousands of years, and it's created this lovely anastomose stream structure, this wet woodland. It's nice and complex, it's really messy, and that is, it's a lovely bit of a habitat. You know, there's loads of birds and insects in there. It's really complex and abundant. But this is what we've got in the main. So we've constrained and confined rivers, we've simplified them, and therefore we've lost a lot of that ecosystem function. We've decreased the ecosystem function, and those river systems, on the whole, what we've got now in river catchments is drainage. It's not a river catchment anymore. We've got river drainage. We're just draining that water as quickly as we can from the river catchment, so that we can utilize the land. This is it sort of diagrammatically. So I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, hopefully if you can, but what we've done, all this really shows is how we've constrained and confined rivers. It's very simplified, but essentially what we've done in a lot of cases, especially in sort of river valley bottoms, is shunt all of that water into a single channel over on one side of the floodplain, so that we can use the rest of it for, roads or agriculture, housing developments. And that's fine. We get to use that land, but we lose a lot of the things that water might deliver in the wider habitat. And this is what perhaps we did and in some cases could have in river catchments, is much more complexity across the board in terms of the hydrology. But then, that if you can bring that water up and out into the landscape where it should be, then you get more complexity in the soils. You've got better geodiversity, and then you increase biodiversity and abundance. There's a lot of benefits from trying to not look to the past and recreate what's in the past, because we can't know exactly. But we can develop some of that complexity. We can look to put some of that back. And so at Honeycutt, we've been doing that in lots of ways. And I guess the beaver release that we did there got lots of headlines, and that was great. But all the beaver really is a tool in the box. They're a missing component, a vital missing component, but they're one of the missing parts of our river systems that have got really important relationships with a lot of the other species. And they're a keystone species. They're an ecosystem engineer. So part of that is the way that they create these wetland landscapes. So they manage them. They need sort of deeper water. So we've got 2 beaver enclosures on the site, and this is one of them. This is Paddocks Wood, and this was the site pre-beaver. So it was unmanaged woodland, very thick. It's a nice bit of habitat, but not much water running through the site. It's not main river. It's just old mill leat infrastructure. So there's a couple of mill ponds in there, and that's the old leat system. And that picture's actually showing sort of a reasonable amount of water for sort of pre-beaver. But beaver they're pretty cumbersome. They like about 60 or 70 centimeters of water. They like to be able to move around and access their vegetation in a nice risk-free way, because they still think there's bears and wolves around. So they like that deeper water to be able to escape predation and to access vegetation in the main. And this is what the beaver have done to that site. So they've sort of dammed right across now. So we've got this big sort of impounded wet woodland, and we've still got sort of areas of the wood as it was, and then we've got sort of the fringe habitat as well. So there's this nice mosaic of different habitats now, whereas before we just had one thing. Now we've got sort of lots of things. The guys were talking about a third. I think that just speaks to that kind of that diversity of habitat. It gives wildlife more options. There's more niches to occupy, and it's not just about the dam building with beavers either. A big part of what we're missing from habitat in general is the right kind of browsing and grazing to develop that sort of complexity. And this is the other site. This is Whiteman's Moor. So this is main river. It's a main river tributary. So it's much more reactive. There's a lot of water moving through the site, but this is a bit of the wood that never really saw water. But what the beaver have done is they've pond and dammed and diverted. And also you can see in the foreground holly, and this was thick with holly. It was a holly thicket, and the beaver just went in and browsed all of that and opened it up. And it just lets the light in, and you get that regrowth, and that's what they do, and that's important as well. So it's with beaver, it's not just about you know, the damming and the ponding. It's about that riparian browsing as well, and that's probably one of the most important things they do with sort of, you know, bankside browsing, and then in sort of that riparian habitat. So beavers one of the things we're doing, and the other thing is sort of proactively sort of looking to restore function in the river catchment. So this is Selworthy Farm. It's an in-hand farm, which means we own the land, but we also manage it at the moment. And this is a 5-hectare site above some woodland on the farm, and it was, as you can see, this is sort of before we did anything to it, and it's just, you know, standard pasture, short crop grass, you know, pretty uninteresting. You know, you got the woodland, so, you know, that was okay, but the field itself, you know, fairly devoid of anything interesting. And but it's very topographically confined, so I identified it as an area where we could try some different things, and we tried some conventional people. You might hear people talk about NFM, natural flood management, and what that essentially means is just people trying to slow the flow of water through a river catchment. And we tried some leaky dams and sort of cross flow ponds and swales and things, and it really high flows, you know, we got a bit of backing up of water, but not really very much. I started speaking to some guys in the US about this floodplain reconnection methodology, which was, instead of thinking in the channel and just thinking how can you slow water in that channel, it was thinking at catchment scale and thinking, right, well, actually that channel is just that's essentially man-made. You know, the ditches and the streams in this field were there to drain the water from the field. So instead of looking to slow the flow of water in those ditches and streams, we'll just do away with the ditches and the streams. So we worked with the US Forestry Service. We were really lucky. They came out and looked at the site for us, and there's a lot of science to it, but essentially we filled it in, and manage, like, it immediately and profoundly resets the hydrology in a landscape. And instead of having that water confined to ditches and streams, it's up and out in the landscape where it should be immediately, and you get all of the benefits of that. You immediately increase ecosystem function, so you're much more resilient to extreme weather. You know, a heavier rainfalls, that that flow is diffuse and slow, and you get infiltration and evapotranspiration. And then at low flows, you've got recharged groundwater, so you know, much more resilient to drought as well. And then you've got all the ecosystem benefits of that water being sort of up and out in the field system. This is an aerial image, so this is a high-res drone image of that same site, and this is actually at really low flows. But you can see, so you can see the woodland edge, and the stream used to run, you know, smack bang along the woodland edge. It was as deep as me, really incised. You know, all the water was just conveyed straight out of that site now. And this is only a year post restoration. You know, there was a lot of bare soil there sort of when we did it. The methodology is you regrade the site, you lay lots of woody debris across the site, and then you plant. We didn't plant because we just wanted to see how things developed sort of naturally. But we still got that really nice, complex, you know, geomorphology across the site, which is that complexity I was talking about earlier, putting back some of the mess. So we've done it on a non-main river context. We're now looking to take that out into the wider catchment. So at the moment, I'm working on a scheme that I'm hoping to deliver in the next year on the main River Aller. So you can see this is it's sort of a 15-hectare site, same farm. Porlock's down the way. This is the A39, and the main river channel runs here. And what we're proposing to do is to apply that methodology to this site. So this is what we've got at the moment. This will be sort of immediately post restoration. Looks terrible, doesn't it? Like you know, there's bare soil, and you know, there's a bit of disturbance there. But then, you know, sort of post restoration, you know, the first spring, you know, the site will revegetate. We're looking to plant, you know, sort of about 25,000 trees across the site, and recreate some of those historic hedge lines, have some infield trees as well, and then just graze it in a way. We might not graze it. We'll look to see how it develops. You know, it might need a pig or two, or some suitable cattle, or this is going to be prime real estate for beaver as well, and they will manage that sort of that riparian habitat. But this is going to be brilliant for bats and birds, you know, invertebrates, moths. I'm assuming if it's good for everything else, it's probably good for moths as well. But and we've got a lot of monitoring in the catchment. So we've got really good ecological baselines, we've got really good hydrological baselines, a couple of PhDs working on the project, so we can really monitor. People talk about nature-based solutions and working with natural processes. There's not that much evidence at the moment. So what we're looking to do is to build that picture, build that narrative, so we can put some meat on the bones of what this work actually delivers. And it's not just the bigger stuff. We're not just focusing on just the rivers. It's important that you think at sort of catchment scale. So we're looking to put water back into that wider landscape as well. Ponds and sort of scrapes and things are a really easy thing that we can do. It's really cost effective. Just often the farms on the estate are missing water. It's all been drained. Even sort of the historic ponds and things have gone. So it's about putting some of that water back so that it can benefit the wildlife on the farms. And we've put, I don't know what, 20-25 ponds in now across the farm so far, and looking to do a lot more. So they're a really important sort of habitat that's missing, and they're really easy sort of to do. And I was talking about in-channel interventions. That approach isn't certainly not obsolete. We do that where we haven't got scope to do anything else. This is up in sort of Selwithy Coombe, and we've put in a series of sort of leaky dams just to back a little bit of water up, create some sort of deeper water there. And again, it's people talk about sort of leaky dams as sort of natural flood management. I don't think they have a great deal of effect on flooding downstream. That they're not the same as sort of a beaver dam or a beaver dam complex. I don't think they work in the same way, but what they do is create a nice bit of habitat, and that's the primary reason for us doing that kind of work. And then we're doing sort of wider work, throughout the estate at the moment on quite large scale to develop, good quality habitat. So here we're clearing some non-native tree species over about sort of 15 hectares. We've done a load of clear felling of non-natives just below where these diggers are, but this is on the fringe habitat between the woodland and the uplands. And what we're doing is looking to clear some of that out, and then we're going to graze that area with a small number of native cattle with sort of fenceless grazing with GPS collars. So then we work with natural process, those sort of large herbivores to sort of to create that and maintain that sort of that dynamism and that habitat. So you've got, Jack was talking about it earlier on. You've got open areas, you've got scrubby areas, you've got trees, you've got those choices for wildlife. And natural regen is probably the best way of developing that, but where that isn't possible, or where you're just not going to get that natural regen, we are doing a lot of tree and hedge planting. So just on my project, I think we've planted about 3 or 4 kilometers of hedgerow and about sort of 25,000-30,000 trees. So we're doing a lot in that regard as well, and sort of big plans for the next sort of year or two as well. And this is what it's all about, really. So that first sort of photo I showed you of Mudpool Meadow, if you can remember, the short crop grass, this is what it looks like now. We had a wildlife photographer there last year, and he said he's never seen so many grasshoppers and butterflies in one place. And that's just 2 years post restoration. The site isn't, it's very immature. I'm looking to get a couple of pigs on the site this spring, just to knock it about a bit, sort of get them grazing, or sort of not what I want them to do is to sort of get into that soil, but get them moving between the the woodland edge into the wood and out into the out into the pasture as well, so we can bring some of that seed bank that's in the wood out and develop that fringe habitat. So I'm quite excited to see how that goes. And that's it. That's me.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. Well, I'm sorry to appropriate the estate into Devon, but
no, it's fine.
It's good enough. It looks like Devon. So
call it Devon. Call it no. Call it Devon. It doesn't matter.
I always get confused about Exmoor because obviously most of it's in Somerset, but there are bits in Devon. So
we're working on similar. I'm working on similar projects on the Devon side as well. So it's
excellent. Excellent. Good. No, so it was really interesting and a nice sort of contrast, with your sort of largely water-based sort of approach to the Sharpham thing. So they're nicely kind of contrasting, whilst obviously sort of still doing the same sort of fundamental thing. So have we got any questions? There's some nice comments coming in. I'll start it off then. So obviously one clear difference between the two projects is that at Sharpham, it's the tenants who are driving the rewilding. And in your case, it's the landlord, the landowner who's driving the rewilding. And I wondered how you get the tenant farmers on side with that, what the response has been, whether there are sort of battles along the way. How do you convince because presumably some of these tenant farmers have been there for a long time, possibly many generations, and it's quite a new thing, I guess, for them.
No, it's really challenging. We've got a real mix of tenants on the estate and wider expo. So we have got, we've got at least one tenant who's very geared, she's all about regenerative agriculture. So her farm, it's whole life pasture fed, very few numbers of livestock, no inputs. They overwinter. She's all about the soil. She won't let anybody drive on the farm. So she's, they're sort of on it, and they're doing well. And it's a diversified farm business as well. So she's got they've got a farm shop. They run sort of a pizza business. They've got a market. They've got like a little garden for the local community as well. The local community used to grow fruit and vegetables, so they've got that on the farm. But she's taken a lot of flack from the other farmers on the estate. She's been called a hobby farmer. Her farm's a petting zoo. It's. But saying that, I ran some talks tail end of last year with some farmers that do things in different ways. So a farmer from up north called Sam Beaumont, the guys from Piper's Farm, a guy called Chris Clark and Neil Hesseltine, sort of farmers that approach things in a slightly different way. And it was really interesting. We got a good turnout, and the guys sort of listening to the talks, and then this young lad, Sam Beaumont, a farmer up in the lake, started talking about the money he gets from selling his meat direct. And he was talking about some of the pigs he'd got and how much he'd got for those pigs. And you could, as soon as they started talking money, you could see the farmers sort of making notes about, how much money they got for selling this sort of meat direct. So they are sort of coming around. But in the main, when you start to talk to, got to be careful what I say. Generally, when you're saying, I want to re-wet these areas, or I want it to be scrubby, they're just like, well, you're going to ruin my bloody farm. It's a mess. Like, you're going to ruin it. It's waste of a good land. I've heard that a lot. It'll be a waste of a good farm, and it's how. But that's what the market has dictated. That's what subsidies dictated. That land's works really hard. That you go right to your margins. It's a clean and tidy farm. You spray it. I think farmers get vilified a lot. And I think that's unfair. They've generally done what they've been asked to do by us as consumers, and I think it's beholden on us in the way we buy, in the way we shop. Food is much bigger than just sort of the farmers that are managing it. They're just at the moment doing what the market's telling them. So I try to. It's not easy. I won't pretend it is, but I'm trying to work with the farmers as much as we can. So that. Up for that river restoration project, we've got what was an arable farm. We're putting that about 125 hectares. We're putting that through arable reversion. So that will just be conservation grazing, hopefully native breed livestock. And I'm also filling in all of the drainage ditches across that 125 hectares. So hopefully, touch wood, we'll have reversed the drainage across the whole upper part of a river catchment, and we'll have some, a farmer doing something in a slightly different way. So, that it will be interesting to see how that develops. But farmers haven't got it easy. There's a lot of uncertainty still about elms, the new sort of farm payments, and that's what it needs really. Is they need certainty. They need clear signals as to what they should be doing. So it's not not easy. It's not easy for them at the moment.
No, absolutely, and of course the that kind of fundamental point that you and Jack and Phil also made very clearly about tidiness being the bane of wildlife. Tidiness and biodiversity do not go together, and of course that's not that's by no means exclusively a farming issue. You see that in gardens, you see it in urban areas, the incessant cutting of grass in on road verges and hedges and parks, and people's manicured gardens. That's all part and parcel of the same thing.
Ecological tidiness disorder. That's what Benedict MacDonald calls it, doesn't he?
Yeah, and it's we can all do a little bit of rewilding wherever.
But I think what we'll struggle with is the stuff that Jack and Phil at Ambius doing is amazing. This, like we're trying at Honeycutt, but until it's hard. It's going to be hard to do it at scale until because what farmers will say is, but we're growing the food for the nation. We're feeding the nation, but we waste, what is it like globally? We waste a third of the food that we produce. The load goes to, the dairy industry and other livestock. But until we change the way, it's got to come from both ends. We've got to change the way we consume to change the way food's produced. And it's unfair to sort of batter farmers at the time all the time and say, you should do it differently if the rest of the supply chain doesn't facilitate it. Anyway, I'm rambling. But.
No, that's fine. Right. So I've got a hand up from Nick Pratt.
Yeah, hi, Ben. Thank you very much. Brilliant talk. And Jack and Phil as well. Thanks to both of you. It was just to follow up that point about neat and tidiness and it not just being about farmers, because here in Budleigh Salterton, we've got the Lower Otter Restoration Project happening. In fact, your diagram with the river down the right-hand side could have been exactly this project, because there was literally a river running down the right-hand side of the valley, which was pushed over there by Napoleonic period farmers wanted to clear the valley, and it's going to be breached. For people who don't know the project, the Environment Agency has agreed to breach it and flood the valley again.
Yeah,
and of course we have beavers
brilliant
in Budleigh. But what has surprised me and some of my I guess ecologically minded friends here is the resistance from local people, not from the farmers, but just from people living in the town who found all sorts of reasons to be anxious about it. There's a sort of, is it a standing joke? In some ways it's a joke that we have sort of pensioner vandalism going on down at the project at the moment,
right?
Spray paint being used and workers being abused by people you wouldn't imagine would do such things. So it's really surprised me that.
Yeah, people are very attached to the landscape though, aren't they? Hey, I mean, we're quite lucky, we've got quite good local support, but people are, we've got quite short, I guess, a human lifetime isn't a particularly long period of time, and in terms of the landscape, that our kind of memory is quite short. So to us, that the river running as it does, and that at the moment is where people know that river to be, and just because we from a natural process point of view think it might be better spread across the floodplain, they might not be able to get. So a lot of the problem I've faced, because it's disruption though, with the river restoration projects like that, there's disruption. A lot of the issues I've come up against are historical, so about the historic environment, but also from conservationists and ecologists, because it's so with some of those river restoration projects we're looking to do, there will be disturbance. We will be looking to remove sections of hedge or topple a couple of trees, and people just lose their minds, and it's like, but you sometimes got to make a bit of a mess to develop a better sort of whole. And it's so it's I'm not for a minute, this work is challenging, and it is I'm finding it quite challenging at the moment, and I think it's that people want a certain outcome as well. So with a lot of this kind of natural process type stuff, it's that you're saying to people, well, we want to do this and we kind of think this might happen, but we're not too sure and we're not too bothered. As long as it's a bit messier and a bit wetter, that's okay. But people at the Environment Agency and Natural England and the National Park, they're used to engineered designs. You're going to do this is going to happen, and then you're going to see this, and that's one of the things that we're one of the issues we're having as well. But good luck with it, Nick.
Well, I'm not personally involved in the project. I'm just local.
You're just graffitiing. You're just graffitiing.
No, I'm quite the opposite.
Budleigh's answer to Banksy, aren't you, Nick? Right. Any more for any more? I think it's gone 9 now, so we're probably looking to sort of wrap things up. But I'm happy to take another. Well, I'm happy for Ben to take another question if he is, but maybe not.
I'm here.
Hello. Hi.
Hi. I was wondering, in the farm you showed us that you started with, what is the change of income for the farmer?
So with the the river restoration site where we haven't grazed that yet. So at the moment that's an in-hand farm, so we own it and manage it. So the rest of the farm is grazed under license. So, but we don't. It sounds terrible, but we're in kind of the privileged position that we don't really have to make any money from that farm.
That's fine. That's fine for you. That's fine for you. But if you do it, you're asking other farmers to do it.
But what I will say, what we want to do is get the so just a bit of context. That farm was in a really bad state when we took it back. It was, you know, knackered. So what we've done is we've sort of tried to reset things, and this sort of, you know, restoration is part of resetting things. And then we've just grazed certain areas under license, and then at some point what we'll do is, you know, that will be a farm again. With that other farm that I was talking about, with the young farmer who's focused on regenerative agriculture, her business is viable.
But her business is not farming. Her business is running a pizza place. Or a zoo or everything.
No, so, but her farm business, so the grazing side of it, does make money. You know, that it is profitable. And then, but I would argue that if you're gonna have land now, then it would be best to diversify, because, you know, it's let's be clear, like in the upland environment, the only reason that those farms are viable at the moment is because of the farm payments. If you took away, you know, if you took away the farm payments that were focused on agricultural productions, none of those sheep farms would be viable, you know. So it's what you put those subsidies towards. So can you do, am I saying you should just like fence it off and rewild the whole lot? Like, as much as like somebody like me might think that is maybe a good idea, like, it's not going to happen. So we need to get to a situation whereby both the market and the subsidies like allow us to farm in I hate this term, but a nature friendly fashion. But those, like, to be clear, those farm businesses aren't, you know, they aren't viable without the farm payments anyway. But so what Holly's done on her farm is diversify, and now it's viable regardless of the payments. So
the people going into farming now are going to be business people who want to run a business, like where traditionally they wanted to run a farm. I think farmers now are going to have, you know, they'll have the holiday lets, and they'll have the caravans, and they'll have everything.
But I think farmers have
been. So it's just going to be an appeal to a very different group of people.
I don't know that's true, and I think that's maybe doing farmers a disservice. I think they've been business people for a long time. I think you've already got. Business
was farming.
but if you let me finish, like, in a lot, like, let's be honest, the people that are really making money from farming are the agrochemical industry.
Of course.
Yeah. Of course. So and farm, like, I try to make clear, like, I'm not. I completely support. Like, I work with a lot of farmers, and it's about trying to get to a position where, like, what we're doing at the moment isn't working for farmers or for nature. So doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is just insanity. So we've got to try some different things. And what we're doing at Honeycutt, we're not saying, like, we're re-wetting this set. Like, what we're trying to do is create capacitors of biodiversity abundance in the river catchment. We're not saying that should be done everywhere, but hopefully we can do it, try it, and then, you know, we'll have methodologies that work. We'll kind of have some metrics for what that delivers in terms of ecosystem function, and then you can look to integrate that with more conventional farming, or like the guys at Sharp are more, you know. And we've got, like, let's face it, like, we're at midnight when it comes to climate change and biodiversity. You know, like, we're already past the point of, you know, like, there's going to be massive impact. So we've got to try and do something to address, you know, those issues. And if we don't, then, you know, our children will have every right to say, you know, what were you doing when, you know.
I mean, the National Trust can afford to take a farm basically out of food production and, you know.
That farm's not out of production. The rest of the farm's being grazed under license at the moment. So it's not.
I thought you just said that you.
I said we don't. I said we don't have to make any money from it, but it's still grazed. So there are farmers still farming that land. But we're not making any money from it. They're making the money from it.
Okay, because I thought you'd said when you'd moved on from the original 15 acres or whatever it was to 125 acres.
That's a farm that's currently an arable farm, and it's going through arable reversion. It's going to go to grazing.
Mhm.
But that's a tenant farmer. That's land we own, and then is managed by somebody else. But we're helping them and partnering with them on that. So
Mhm.
Okay,
sounds
that's
really
great.
good.
Thanks for that. It's really interesting stuff, and some good food for thought in there, and some very good points by Ben about the fact that things aren't working. That's how we've got into the state that we're in terms of biodiversity loss and obviously climate crisis as well. And so things need to change. Those things need to work for everyone. Whether
Can I ask something else completely practical?
Okay, quickly though, because we're
Sod's
wrapping up, I think.
Sod's law says when you have something you want to watch, something happens. I noticed this is being taped.
Yeah.
Is it going to be possible to watch it? Because I missed most of the stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I explained at the beginning when obviously you weren't here that the whole thing's being recorded and it'll be made available to members. I will email around the link to it once I've it'll probably be a few days to process it and get it up on YouTube.
Okay, thank you very much.
Cool. Great. So well, really interesting, two really interesting talks. Thanks very much, Ben, and thanks again to Jack and Phil. It's the beginning of all of this stuff. It's demonstrations of what's possible, what can work. Some of the things may not work. I mean, not these ones, but in general, that's part of the whole point of testing new approaches, both ecological and managerial and financial approaches to how we manage the land. But I think the key point around rewilding being about the messiness is really nice. That's come out really strongly. If I'd been asked to define rewilding at the start, I'm not sure that's what I would have come up with personally, but I really like that. It's a really nice idea, trying to overcome human beings' obsession with tidiness in all aspects of our lives, which is not good for wildlife and probably not very good for us ultimately as well, because of course we're fighting against the entropy laws of the universe in trying to install order on everything in our dominion. So anyway, great stuff. Thanks everyone for attending. Thanks for everyone for asking questions and all the rest of it, for voting at the appropriate moments. And look forward to seeing you all soon. Hopefully look forward to seeing some of you face to face when the weather warms up and there are some moths flying. Yeah, that'd be great. So I will stop the recording before I forget to do that.